Have you ever wondered what bizarre jobs your grandparents might have had or witnessed? Well, prepare to be amazed because Britain's past was filled with professions so strange they sound completely made up. But these weren't just odd little side hustles. These were legitimate careers that thousands relied on. From human alarm clocks to the ladies who guarded public toilets like Fort Knox, these jobs reveal how dramatically our society has transformed in just a few generations. So join me as we explore 21 forgotten British careers that will make you appreciate your modern job. Before affordable alarm clocks existed, the knocker-upper was essential to industrial Britain. These human alarm clocks made rounds through working-class neighbourhoods, particularly in northern England, armed with long sticks or pea shooters. Every morning before dawn, they'd wake clients by tapping on bedroom windows or shooting dried peas until they got a response. Imagine being startled awake not by your iPhone, but by a stranger shooting peas at your window. Clients paid a few pence weekly for this service, crucial for factory workers who risked losing jobs if late. The most skilled knocker-uppers kept detailed mental records of which windows to tap and when. But who woke up the knocker-upper? Many were night watchmen finishing night shifts. Others were simply early risers who monetized their inability to sleep in. The profession survived into the 1950s, gradually fading as affordable alarm clocks became household staples. If you remember knocker-uppers or have family stories about them, share them in the comments below. Rag and bone. Any old iron. This familiar cry echoed through residential streets from the 1950s through the 1970s, announcing Britain's original recyclers. The rag and bone man travelled neighbourhoods with a horse and cart, collecting unwanted household items, old clothes, scrap metal, furniture, and anything else people didn't want. What made this profession unique was the barter system. Rather than paying cash, they might offer a goldfish in a plastic bag, a balloon, or a few pennies for your unwanted goods. It was recycling with carnival flair. Children would rummage through cupboards for items to trade, excited at the prospect of receiving a small toy in return. These colourful characters knew their regular customers by name and often shared neighbourhood gossip. By the 1970s, as consumer culture took hold and municipal waste collection improved, these sustainable entrepreneurs began disappearing from British streets. Before automation revolutionized bowling alleys, pin setting was perhaps one of the most dangerous yet oddly entertaining jobs a young person could have in 1950s Britain. Perched on narrow ledges above the pins, these brave teenagers would jump down after each roll, quickly clear fallen pins, and reset them in perfect formation, all before scrambling back to safety before the next ball came hurtling toward them. Pin setters needed lightning-fast reflexes and a casual relationship with personal safety. For their troubles, they earned a few pennies per game, making it popular among schoolboys looking for pocket money. Regular bowlers often developed relationships with their pin setters, sometimes tipping them for especially quick service. The job was hot, noisy, and occasionally resulted in bruised shins if timing went awry. By the early 1960s, the Brunswick automatic pin setter began appearing in upscale British bowling alleys. The last human pin setters in Britain were mostly gone by 1963. Before central heating became standard, the coal delivery man was vital to keeping British homes warm until the 1970s. These men were the unsung heroes of winter, delivering heavy sacks of coal in all weather conditions. A typical coalman would haul 50-kilogram sacks on his back, navigating narrow alleyways, steep garden paths, and tight coal cellar doors. The job required immense physical strength. A single delivery round might involve moving several tons of coal by hand. Coalmen developed distinctive physical characteristics: broad shoulders, powerful arms, and a permanent coating of coal dust that seemed embedded in their skin. With a practiced flick, they deposit coal into customers' bunkers with minimal spillage. Many developed coal tattoos, where dust became permanently embedded in cuts and scrapes. As gas and electric heating became common through the 1960s and 70s, demand for coal deliveries declined, dealt a final blow by the Clean Air Acts. Hit that like button if your family home ever had coal deliveries or a coal bunker. The gentle clink of glass bottles at daybreak was once the soundtrack to British mornings, thanks to the milkman, a profession that's now nearly extinct but was once essential. Every morning, rain or shine, the milkman would make his rounds before most people were awake, delivering fresh milk in distinctive glass bottles. What made the milkman special wasn't just the dairy products, it was his role as a community fixture. Many milkmen served the same routes for decades, knowing their customers by name. Homes would leave empty bottles with money tucked under them, sometimes with notes requesting extra items. The milkman would make the exchange while most residents slept. Milkmen were also unofficial neighborhood watchdogs, often the first to notice if elderly residents hadn't collected previous deliveries or if something seemed amiss. The decline began in the 1970s as supermarkets offered cheaper milk and refrigerators became standard. By the 1990s, home delivery had become a luxury rather than a necessity. Number, please. These words, spoken by predominantly female voices, connected Britain for decades before automated systems took over. Seated before massive switchboards with countless cables and plugs, telephone exchange operators, mostly women, manually connected every phone call made in Britain. When you picked up your telephone, an operator would answer, ask what number you wanted, and physically connect your line to the recipients using cables and plugs. The job required remarkable dexterity, memory, and patience. Operators memorized hundreds of numbers, worked at lightning speed, and maintained perfect telephone etiquette, even with rude callers. Exchange operators were privy to the most intimate details of community life. This led to a strict code of confidentiality. The best operators were known for their discretion. The profession was almost exclusively female, with strict requirements. Women had to be single. They were expected to resign upon marriage until the 1960s, well-spoken, and have arms long enough to reach across the switchboard. The profession began declining in the 1960s as automated exchanges were introduced. Before self-cleaning toilets, public conveniences across Britain were guarded by a special breed of gatekeeper, the public convenience attendant, often known as the toilet lady, or loo warden. These formidable individuals, typically older women with no-nonsense attitudes, maintained public toilets with military precision. Armed with mops, disinfectant, and an eagle eye for troublemakers, they ensured these facilities remained clean and respectable. For the privilege of using these facilities, visitors would pay a small fee, initially a penny, hence the phrase, spending a penny. Later 2 pence, and eventually 5 pence, as inflation took its toll on the toilet economy. Many attendants expanded their role, creating mini-empires within their tile domains. They might sell emergency toiletries, dispense hand towels, or run small tuck shops offering sweets and cigarettes. The profession began declining in the 1980s as local councils cut costs and introduced automated payment systems. Going up. These words once greeted shoppers in department stores across Britain. The lift attendant was more than just a button pusher. They were part tour guide, part security guard, and part ambassador. Dressed in smart uniforms that often included white gloves and pillbox hats, lift attendants operated the manual controls of early elevators, ensuring smooth journeys between floors. They announced each level with rehearsed descriptions: second floor, ladies' fashions, millinery, and accessories. Early lifts needed to be stopped precisely level with each floor. Too high or too low could result in dangerous trips. Attendants developed an almost supernatural sense of exactly when to pull the lever to achieve a perfect landing. Beyond technical skills, the role demanded impeccable social graces. Attendants were expected to make polite conversation, remember regular customers, and maintain decorum in what was essentially a small moving room. The profession began declining in the 1960s as automated lifts became more common. Any more fares, please? This familiar call once rang through double-decker buses across Britain, issued by one of the most quintessentially British professions, the bus conductor. Armed with a ticket machine strapped to their chest, a leather change pouch, and often a whistle, conductors were the multitasking masters of public transport. They collected fares, issued tickets, announced stops, helped passengers on and off, and kept order among rowdy schoolchildren. The conductor's ticket machine was a mechanical marvel, a heavy metal device with various dials to adjust for different fare zones. With practiced fingers, they could calculate fares, make change, and print tickets in seconds, all while maintaining balance on a moving vehicle. Communication between driver and conductor was an art form. 2 rings on the bell meant move on, 1 meant stop. The profession began declining in the 1970s as one-person-operated buses became more common. Subscribe now for more nostalgic British history videos and ring that notification bell. Long before digital news, the paperboy, or occasionally papergirl, was a fixture of British mornings from the 1950s through the 1990s. Rising before dawn, these young entrepreneurs would collect their allocated newspapers from the local newsagent, carefully fold them for throwing, and set off on their bicycles in all weather conditions. Rain, snow, or shine, the papers had to be delivered. For many British teenagers, a paper round was their first taste of employment and responsibility. The job taught punctuality, route planning, and customer service, all for a few pounds a week plus Christmas tips if you were lucky. The typical paperboy carried a heavy canvas bag slung across their shoulder, often containing dozens of newspapers. The weight could be substantial, especially on Sundays when papers were thick with supplements. Paperboys developed intimate knowledge of their neighborhoods, which houses had dogs to avoid, which customers wanted their paper in a specific spot, and which gardens had treacherous paths in icy weather. While telephone exchange operators connected the general public, large businesses, hotels, and department stores had their own internal communications experts, the switchboard girls. Seated at the reception desk or in a dedicated room, these young women operated smaller versions of the telephone exchange, directing calls to various departments and offices within the building. They were often the first point of contact for customers or clients, making their telephone manner crucial to the business's reputation. The job required exceptional memory and organizational skills. Switchboard girls memorized dozens or even hundreds of extension numbers, knew which executives were in or out of the office, and developed tactful ways to screen unwanted calls. In hotels, they might also serve as an information service, connecting guests to local businesses or attractions. In department stores, they would direct customer inquiries to the appropriate department, sometimes even checking stock availability before transferring calls. The profession began declining in the 1970s as electronic switchboards with direct dialing capabilities became more common. In an era when televisions were expensive luxury items, many British families rented rather than purchased their sets from companies like Radio Rentals, DER, or Rumble Lows. When these precious entertainment boxes inevitably broke down, the TV rental repairman became the most welcome visitor imaginable. These technical wizards would arrive in branded vans carrying toolboxes and spare parts to diagnose and fix television problems on the spot. They were part engineer, part magician in the eyes of families desperate to restore their main source of entertainment. Early televisions were complex, temperamental devices filled with vacuum tubes and components that regularly failed. Repairmen needed extensive technical knowledge and diagnostic skills to identify problems quickly. The relationship between families and their TV repairman was often warm and personal. Regular visits for adjustments or repairs meant they became familiar faces, often greeted with cups of tea and biscuits as they worked their electronic magic. The profession began declining in the 1980s as televisions became more reliable and cheaper to purchase outright. Before personal computers transformed office work, large businesses relied on typist pools, rooms filled with young women operating typewriters to handle all written communication. These typing specialists would take dictation from executives or work from handwritten drafts, transforming them into perfectly formatted letters, reports, and documents. The clickety-clack of dozens of typewriters working simultaneously created a distinctive soundtrack to office life from the 1950s through the 1980s. The job required exceptional accuracy and speed. Professional typists could maintain 60 to 100 words per minute with minimal errors. Mistakes were costly. With no delete key or spell check, a single error often meant retyping an entire page. Typist pools operated with strict hierarchies and rules. Junior typists handled routine correspondence, while seniors took on confidential or complex documents.